Welcome to Ground Zero. It's a Christian podcast. I just want to welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah, for sure.
And so we'll start with introducing everybody. I'm Nate Dogg, Nathan Woodruff. Mark.
My name's Mark Rose, no nickname to think of.
Marky Mark.
Sure.
My name is Luke Short.
Our first question is why we're starting this podcast. It's more for, the younger generation. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Snapchat's really taken over, our generation by a lot. And we look at it as a really good ministry opportunity. And so with that being said, we have a mission statement of why we have it. So
This comes from the Bible, Mark 15:16. And he said to them, "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to all the creation." That's NASB, and that is red letter. So definitely think that suits our mindset for the podcast and just helps us to keep our mind focused on the outreach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that during a time of a lot of fear and isolation with the pandemic, that we are all separated from each other, that this gives us an opportunity to proclaim the gospel in a new way, in a modern way that technology allows us to, that we can talk about the gospel and that it will spread farther than we could just ourselves, and people get here that we may never even meet. So,
Yes, exactly. And I definitely think that there's a lot of negative that comes from technology. You definitely hear that a lot in sermons and things, but I also think that there could be a lot of positive Christian influence, and I definitely think that it could be a God thing because it talks about the Bible.
Well, and it's kind of like when the television came out. If we would have actually jumped on the television, we would have had so much more, influence on the world. But instead, we were like, "Oh, the television is the worst thing in the world. Don't touch that thing. It's the devil's box." As Christians. So it's good that we're embracing this technology and trying to, work with it so we can actually, minister to other people. So with that being said, what's our next question on here would be, what are our plans for the podcast? I think we kind of made it with that, kind of answered both of them. What we said was, we want to minister to people, outreach, and everything else. What
Specifically younger, like the youth right now, just because of the whole Generation Z, and just that we've freshly came out of that as being young adults and being youth leaders, and that's where our heart is right now. So
yeah, and just an opportunity to proclaim some hope when we could really use it during where the world is right now. So
for sure. All right, do we want to give testimonies?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to start?
I'll start.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So my name is Luke again, and I grew up in church my whole life, so I can't remember a time that I did not go to church. Thankfully, my single mom was a God-fearing woman, and she gave us the privilege of going to church every single day. So I had a head knowledge of the gospel very, very early on. But I knew, because I grew up in a Bible-believing, God-fearing church, that I wasn't saved and I wasn't a Christian, even as a kid. There was a couple times where I felt like that I might have been a Christian, converted to Christianity, but I never saw a life change. Eventually, what it took for me was going through my wild phases through my junior and senior year of high school, and then not knowing what to do with my life, and then joining the Army, becoming a member of the Army National Guard in Arkansas. And as I went through basic, about the fourth weekend, I was in the chapel, and I just came to an end of myself, and I seriously believe it was my church family and my family back home praying for me that helped me get through the situation, obviously, but also to turn my heart and soften my heart for the gospel, for Jesus. And actually, to the song "Reckless Love," I just gave up, and I was just like, my my life's years got. And really, like, for me, ever since then, obviously we sin daily because of the world and just human nature, but my heart has been in trying to minister to other people and just to have a community of guys. So I definitely think that's an important thing. And for me right now, I am a youth leader for a younger group of guys at my church and the youth, and then working at Walmart as a Cap 2 associate and struggling through college.
There we go. All right.
And then, do we want to do it this way? So Mark?
All right. Yeah, I'll go next. So like I said, my name's Mark, and kind of like Luke at the beginning of my life, I grew up in church. I was a pastor's kid. I was raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and I got saved at a very young age. I was around 5, and my parents did a great job raising me, and like I said, I was in church, but at such a young age, I didn't really understand the relationship aspect that came with salvation. I definitely knew hell was a bad place and heaven was an amazing place, so why would I not want to go there? So of course I got saved. Well, fast forward a few years, and my family kind of had a falling out with the church, and we had to leave, and then we ended up moving down to Arkansas. So really,
Of all places.
yeah, really turned my world upside down. I was like, where is this place? And yeah, it just totally changed my reality. I was homeschooled, and I had a very small world in Canada. So leaving the country, leaving everything I knew, I didn't know what was what anymore, but that was at age 9. So I came to Arkansas, and it was a very interesting season of my life, getting used to living in the woods instead of the city, and being in a small place with not a lot of people around. So during that time, there was a lot of confusion, and I started to backslide and fall into a life of sin. And I realized that I needed that relationship aspect with Christ. I needed to pursue that. And one night I cried out to him, I prayed to him, and I feel like that was a real catalyst for the next stage, I guess, of my sanctification. And I really grew close to God in that time. So, see, that was around 11 years old, and, you know, a lot of ups and downs. I moved several times, and I finally was brought here to Harrison, and went to college, started to get involved with serving in my youth group here, Woodland, and I started to get involved with leading worship and serving in that way. And I went to college up at SBU in Bolivar, Missouri, and I have just recently graduated, and I'm back here in Harrison. And right now it's just a time that it's the beginning of a new season for me, and God has really been burdening my heart about discipleship and like Luke said, being in a community of men that will sharpen each other and support each other. So, and now it brings me here with these guys at this podcast, and this honestly was their brainchild, and it wasn't my idea, and I'm kind of here along for the ride. And yeah, that's me.
It's good. It's good. Well,
We skipped Stan. We'll have to go back to him.
Stan, yeah, I want to talk about Stan's testimony. Well, you know, for me, I was raised in church. I've been in church my whole life, and I guess for me, like, you know, it was for me for a while. It was just a routine as a kid. I just thought, oh, everybody just goes to church. Everybody, you know, goes here. But I feel like I started to get a heart for God, probably about at the age of 12. And, you know, I started actually build my relationship with God, starting to, you know, do a lot more. And, you know, God's really helped me through my life there. But, you know, you go a couple years later, and probably about like the age of 15 or 16, we got a new youth pastor. My old youth pastor passed away from a heart attack. and me and that youth pastor didn't get along. I'm not saying he was a bad guy. You know, I was in youth. I was going through a lot of stuff at that time. I was going through rebellious stages, and me and him kind of had a falling out. And so I just decided I'm going to quit church. I'm going to quit being a Christian. I'm going to quit doing good things. I'm going to do what I want to do. And, you know, it wasn't that I didn't believe in God. I just didn't want to serve him anymore. I was just like, what's the point? You know, so I just kind of started going down a bad road, probably from the age of 15 to 17. And around that time, I was just getting to a point where I wasn't liking the man I was becoming. And the youth pastor at that church now invited me to church service, and, you know, I kind of rededicated my life back to Christ. And since then, I've been in church. I'm not saying I'm a perfect angel, because, you know, there's been times where I've almost backslid again and everything. But right after that, I've been going to that church for another 4 or 5 years. And it's actually 4 because I'm only 20, but anyways, but for me, it's really, God's really helped me through a lot of stuff, really hard times. You know, a couple years later, my parents there's a huge family thing going on. My parents got a divorce, and I started to get back to almost in my old ways. I almost stopped going to church again. And I actually had a couple of friends, a good guys group, a small one that we had at the church that really helped me through that. And what I'm trying to get at is I feel like that's what they were talking about as a discipleship, as a guys group, and that's what's really going to help us through this time, is starting out right here, starting out, you know, iron sharpens iron and stuff. But I'm right now in my life, I went to college, didn't like it, so I kind of left. I have my construction degree. I work with a guy with special needs, and I work at a work center that helps people with special needs. So I think that's kind of where my heart's at right now. I'm a youth intern at my church. I'm kind of like the other guys. That's one thing as with this podcast, is we kind of have one accord, is that we all have hearts for the youth, you know, the young people in our generation. So that's one thing that really helps, is that we all have the same attitude of why we want to start this podcast and why, you know, it's starting up. So, yeah.
And something I wanted to second there was when you said starting here, like where we started right here. That's where the Ground Zero podcast came from. Also came from because when we first moved in here, me and Nate, because this is our place, the basement, and you know, it's ground zero, like it's the lowest part of the house. And also, like, I realized that I wanted this place to be like a mission field, or not necessarily a mission field, but a mission, like where mission starts, in a ground zero. You know, you can only go up from zero. You can go back too, but but yeah. And so I just wanted to second that, and why we named it Ground Zero.
Well, you know, and besides this podcast being called Ground Zeros, we've started a men's group on Thursdays, and it's called Ground Zero as well. And we want to just, you know, I feel like we're called to, you know, impact this generation, and, you know, be giant slayers and rattle the cages of YouTube and social media. So, yeah.
Exactly. I agree.
Well, I think that sums up the first episode.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and be looking forward to new videos and getting to see us again.
Well, you know, next week we're talking about how life's not all about sunshine and rainbows when you're living for Christ. So we're going to talk about that, and like and subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, sir. Thank you, guys.
All right. Let's go, baby!
Let's go, Nate! Yeah!